Okay, Sean, here's some modern classic internet. It's a 4chan post.
Oh, God.
And it begins, "This really happened," with a crudely drawn picture of Ryan Gosling's character from the film Drive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read this out.
"Decent looking guy, having a good job. Not many friends and single because of job. Work third shift. Watch Drive for the first time ever. Changes my life. I want to be Driver. Get my hair cut like the driver. And start wearing clothes like Driver. No scorpion jacket because I'm not autistic.
I'm sorry for the use of autistic as a slur.
Start behaving like Driver. Quiet but cool. Buy brand new 2011 Mustang GT 5 litre because Driver drove one and I make enough, so fuck it. Start eating at this tiny little diner every night. Staff remember me, always save me a spot. Cutie pie waitress always chats me up, gives me a free pie."
There's something about the free pie that makes me laugh.
This is fiction. It reads like a poem.
"I reciprocate but remain vague and brooding. Waitress wants me. Ask her if she wants to go for a drive. She gladly accepts. Cruise the night listening to Drive soundtrack. Drop her off at her apartment. Ask if I want to come inside for a coffee. Oh fuck yes. Play it cool, brood for a sec, reply with a ellipses. Yeah. Simple.
Wow.
Simple.
We fuck. Waitress and I start dating. Keep up with my Driver shtick. She introduces me to her friends. They think I'm cool as fuck. Some of her dude friends start wearing skinny jeans, white tees like me. Holy fuck, lol. One night her and I sit down to watch a movie on demand. She's browsing movies, stops on Drive. Oh fuck. You seen this one yet? Anon? Shit. Play it cool, man. What would Driver do?
Why would Driver be in this situation?
What would Driver do if Driver had seen Drive?
It raises a lot of questions.
Based his identity on the film.
Brood for a sec. Nah, it's not my thing. Ended up watching Bridesmaids. Next line, and final line. Still dating today and still doesn't know I've been pretending to be Ryan Gosling for 4+ years.
Wow. So... this guy has the most honest to goodness, like Achilles heel kryptonite thing in his life. Yeah. All of us have weakness and vices and things that we're susceptible to or that upset us. This guy's got like a life ruining button. It's the play button on the film Drive. Like his life could be not just destroyed, but like everyone will think so differently of him.
Yeah, it will flip from thinking that this guy is cool as fuck and people are copying how he dresses to thinking he is a loser and a psycho.
Though, again, we can only get that, like, someone who has copied Drive as their entire aesthetic, and not just aesthetic, but like the way they behave and treat other people. Like, it's not just a look, remember. It's also how he responds, how he talks to people. He's chosen to empathise via another person's personality, a personality you only spend like 90 minutes with.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to do a lot of extrapolating. Oh, what would the driver do in this highly particular urinal conversation? How would he talk to...
Not what would Jesus do?
What
would Driver do?
You've got a lot more text to extrapolate Jesus' responses than any given thing. Jesus also is way more quick to give his prescriptive advice on what you should do as generalised rules. Jesus is actually quite a good guy to do this
Very
with.
clear, I suppose. Whereas Driver, famously, Ryan Gosling went through the script and deleted as much of it as he could to replace it with brooding.
Nice. A brooding person, I guess you do have like an easy thing for every scenario, because brooding... If you're brooding, you brood everywhere. Do you know what I mean? Brooding is a catch-all for a brooding person.
So we can flip it then, saying just because he doesn't give as much detail as Jesus, in a way, if you ask yourself what would Driver do, the answer is normally brood.
Yeah, sort of minimal responses. Think about steering. I tell you who's a lot better than Driver, who I'd base my life on. Speed Racer.
Whoa,
Speed Racer. I would imagine you based your entire life on Speed Racer. It was all completely technicolor. There was no depth of field. And
physics means nothing.
Yeah. something as simple as like walking to the shop,
Yeah.
you would have to like run and jump through 4-dimensional space
Whoa.
and kill a man with your shoe. And then someone's like, do you want to watch Speed Racer? It's like, never heard of it, don't like it.
Yeah,
no.
Yeah.
And then you just high five your pet monkey.
No, when they say, do you want to watch Speed Racer, you have to think to yourself, what would Speed Racer do?
He'd pop it in. He'd pop it on. He'd say, let's go.
Mandatory Redistribution Party. Mandatory Redistribution Party. Mandatory Redistribution Party. Mandatory Redistribution Party. Redistribution Party. Mandatory Redistribution Party. Redistribution Party.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Mandatory Redistribution Party. I'm Sean Morley,
And I am Jack Evans.
and this ep is about the internet of yore, the gleaming wires of yesteryear.
And how its continued existence can only be justified if it makes a solid return on investment.
The scope of the internet's reach is ever expanding, compounded by a disease which prohibits outdoor japes. Our entire lives are mediated by shifting between devices of different screen sizes.
We look at how the internet has changed over time and has become the playground of a minuscule number of tech titans. We're only allowed on the swings on their terms because all the other playgrounds are not only closed, but gone.
A big TY to everyone who's subscribed on Patreon. Without your contributions, the show would still be possible, but we'd do it grumpily, no enthusiasm, a slog. If you want to subscribe, hop on to patreon.com/mandatory redistribution party.
If you're unable to help us out on Patreon, we do also genuinely appreciate when people share our stuff on social media or 3D print episodes onto like vinyl, which is then posted to local care homes.
Now, let's log on. So I remember in secondary school, MSN Messenger was like, my brain keeps providing the phrase shadow world, where
Okay.
you talk to your friends on MSN Messenger, you talk to some other people through the school, but also knowing people's MSN Messenger email address was like this currency you could pass along. So sometimes you wouldn't even have your friend on MSN Messenger, but you would have like this acquaintance just because someone else knew them and could give you the email address. So you'd end up like developing relationships just on the spider web of like what email addresses you could get your hands on. The reason I think of it as a shadow world is you often didn't talk about what went on in MSN Messenger, but because you would make acquaintances that didn't quite link up with your in-school friendships, which everyone secondary school, you know, it's a mean girls hierarchy of people who have to like or dislike each other based on preconceived notions of who your friends are in this environment, in this particular corridor for this particular science lesson.
Yeah. Mean everyone.
But mean everyone, mean teachers, mean cleaning staff. It is a war of all against all. But on MSN Messenger, you know, you're not here to learn science. You're not trapped in a corridor. You can talk to whoever you want. So there were friends you'd have on MSN Messenger that socially you couldn't talk to in the school.
Yeah.
And there were even like people who you were enemies with in school. But on MSN Messenger, you were pretty sound with each other.
Yeah.
And as well, MSN Messenger feeling less personal and less like in person and therefore less anxiety inducing.
You're not called Sean, you're called Dragonblade.
Yeah, and a lot of people did their like not romancing, but like information finding on the path to romance through MSN Messenger. I know there was a lot of stuff went on with fake accounts in my school.
Yeah.
Of one, I had friends who'd make a fake account to add a girl, invent an identity, and then ask the girl if they liked their real identity.
Fucking
and that was their
hell.
way of finding information.
Yeah,
that
that's insane.
never worked.
No, it didn't surprise me. You surprised me.
There's a level of bad plan that can only be described as insane. There's only a level of bad plan which should get someone sent straight to the doctors.
Teen plan.
Teen plan, yeah. This plan is rated T for therapy. But then there would be people who would ask each other out on MSN Messenger because it's less scary. someone asked someone else out on my behalf without my consent on MSN Messenger, but I was into it. It was good. Thank you. Big help. But then you have to meet up with someone.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, are we like dating now? Because that was confirmed in the shadow realm.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's weird as hell.
I remember going on a date arranged in that very way, well, not the way with the sinister second account, but an MSN arranged date to Chester. And it was, to this day, the most awkward dating experience of my life.
Tell me more.
We got on the train. I would say half an hour into the train journey, I was like, nah, I want out.
Whoa, that's very fast.
Yeah.
What was it? An actual something happened or just bad vibes?
Bad. Do you know what? Vibes. And then obviously, if I wanted out, there's no way I'm concealing those vibes to the extent I can try to conceal those vibes, but they would have been out there. You know, you're 14, you're on a train to Chester. Bad.
You've just given me flashbacks of a lot of bad dates.
Yeah.
I remember one, and this was in Hull City Centre, and I don't even know if this person realises this is supposed to be a date, but they're not giving me any, because fair enough, you don't realise it's a date, but you at least give off friendly vibes, I think. Let's give off like warm vibes. Yeah. And so I'm like, I know how to deal with this. Film. Let's go straight to a film. Super bad. It was not a good pick, I think. Too many gross out jokes. Too much. Superbad is a comedy about fucking. About kids who want to fuck.
Film is a good choice, but Superbad is a terrible choice.
I didn't know.
Your premise was sound. How could you know?
I didn't know. I wasn't going based on trailer. I was going based on panic.
Yeah. Bad way to choose a film. Although I think both these scenarios cannot be put down to the internet or MSN and should just be put down to teen plan.
Rated T for therapy.
Do you think the internet's got worse?
100% yes, definitely.
What would you pinpoint?
There's only 5 websites now. Like, that encapsulates the whole problem. I remember the first time I read it, I'm like, that's not true. There's loads. But there's not really. There's like...
Especially when you go to like who owns what.
Yeah, in that kind of... You go to a supermarket and someone goes, you know, only like 7 people own all of this. And I'm like, that can't be true, because this is milk and this is a sandwich. How could that possibly be owned by the same person? Some kind of sandwich milk expert. Are you off your rocker?
Facebook, Twitter, Google,
YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and then
Google
can do
owns
like the
YouTube.
other.
Facebook owns WhatsApp.
Facebook owns Instagram. TikTok for now is separate. TikTok's its own little
TikTok
universe,
is long
though,
game.
it's not
TikTok
really
is
internet.
a long game Chinese op that will be triggered in 2040s.
You know how the internet's this big connected sphere of websites that you can be on? TikTok is now an app, which is a website with a complete fence around it. So it doesn't behave like a website, and you basically need to be on a phone with all your data and GPS and stuff on. So that's like the long-term game of TikTok, is to gather data in such a more extreme way by not even allowing a browser version of it.
Yeah, data mining. How you experience the internet's very generational, isn't it? So boomers still don't fully get the internet. They're on Facebook, but their thing was TV when they were young, and it's still their thing, which is why all the adverts are for boomers. Like, you can be watching Blade 2 at 1 o'clock in the morning, the adverts will still be for like Audi's life insurance, Viagra. And you can tell boomers on YouTube because the adverts are for like VPNs and Skillshare, and boomers don't need Skillshare because they've got all the skills they need, owning a house and racism.
Boomers go into YouTube if they're fringe boomers that aren't finding their weird interest here. So if you look at people who have gone super new age, super right wing, or super very strange belief, they can trend a little bit older because they've found a place on YouTube because there wasn't a place anywhere else. I remember getting really into breatharianism, falling down that rabbit hole. Are you familiar with breatharianism? It's like top tier new age, the belief that you can sustain yourself on sunlight. Strange that it's called breatharianism, which like talks a lot about the breath, but really it's about light energy. And there was a woman who charted herself on YouTube going fully into this, but she was not one of the shills. She was one of the she was the duped. And so you got loads of comments, people going, you'll die, please don't do this. She's going, I'm getting a lot of hate in the comments today anyway. Day 17 of me starving myself. That's the kind of older generation that find themselves on YouTube.
Yeah, and what that's a good specific example of is how the niche stuff that used to be packed out into like a specific message board or a specific website now exists as a part of YouTube or a Facebook group. You know, that stuff is still there. It's just structured differently and controlled by these like mega corporations. So I think one of the defining things of early internet was peer-to-peer stuff.
LimeWire.
So what peer-to-peer is when you don't need like a central server. So all Facebook and all this other like modern stuff runs on these huge server farms, right? Basically, you could go from computer in your house to computer in someone else's house, and you can share a Nirvana track or an episode of Lost or whatever. So you got Napster was the big one. Although actually the guy, Sean Parker, the Napster guy. Do you know what he went on to do?
No.
Became president of Facebook. Like the guy under
Zuckerberg. That's incredible.
In 2004. Peer-to-peer, obviously it's like a structural thing. So peer-to-peer, we still see like Bitcoin has its legacy as peer-to-peer, but also like the way people consume stuff when you watch the thing was your choice in that sense on demand of like, there's no adverts because someone's edited them all out because it would have been ripped probably from live TV and then put on their peer-to-peer website, and then you consume it at your own leisure. I think that had a big impact in like shaping the modern internet in terms of, I think stuff that was done illegally and in a bottom-up sort of improvised way was then honed and harvested by these big corporations. And that peer-to-peer element, which was so inspiring and so sort of changed so many things, has gone.
Yeah. Instead, people can't really share stuff like that they've made, and nor can they efficiently steal from the big corporations and just share things that are on TV. And, there's been so much done about like sharing apocryphal, old, weird bits of art that you cannot get legitimately, be it old games or weird bits of tracks and stuff that just isn't even sold in your region. That still gets like claimed, and so we've got like a copyright law enforced on the internet that says you can never experience this this thing. There's literally no way you can ever enjoy this piece of art. Not that we're trying to funnel you into buying a thing. There's nothing you can buy. You just cannot do this because there are copyright laws, and copyright laws now are not enforced by individuals, although a lot of the time they are. Still loads of DMCA claims is someone hired an office just to go claim that. And speaking of Napster, like it was just in the news, not the news, but like it was on social media trending topics,
right?
That like Metallica, who they went big time after Napster, and basically Lars Ulrich, who's the drummer, got like Napster shut down. Well, that like set a precedent for like what would become like DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, of that is the American law that underpins why things get taken down automatically, be they on YouTube, Twitter, uploaded onto Facebook.
Or in this specific example, Twitch.
Streamed through Twitch. Metallica did a live concert as part of, was it the
BlizzCon?
Blizzard? Yeah, so
Video game
BlizzCon, Blizzard's a big video game company. They did their big conference, obviously all online, all like socially distanced. Metallica did a live concert, but it had to be muted everywhere because the algorithms that Metallica themselves helped create the laws that they're based on. They then had to be played over with like jingle jangle ukulele royalty free copyrighted music while people watch them play their guitars in silence.
In essence, it's about control. It's really about controlling what you own. We clearly own our own songs. We own the master recordings to those, and we want to be the ones that control the use of those on the internet. That's it in essence. So we are going after Napster legally, in a legal form, but at the same time, which is becoming increasingly important to us, is to try and get this debate out into the public forum, to try and make people understand what's at stake here and what the ramifications are if this is not something that's dealt with some sort of parameters that makes the artists and the fans out there happy.
The reason that like memes can exist is because there isn't the level of neural network available to go, oh, I think that frame is actually from Glee, so we're going to get you to stop using that frame where that woman says, I'm going to create a hostile, toxic environment, because they can't recognize those. But every time you fill out a captcha form, saying which way round should a rhino be, how many like signs are in this picture, the moment, if someone wants to, that capture stuff can go straight towards a new algorithm doing that. At the moment, it's just trying to get smart cars to kill fewer pedestrians. But the moment the death counts within an acceptable level, that capture technology is going to go somewhere else.
And it's the fact that the internet, like the dream of the internet, and this is the sort of 90s. Here's the playwright and self-proclaimed internet enthusiast John Allen talking about the internet in 1993.
There's an interesting kind of restraint that you find. I mean, there's not a lot of cursing or swearing. There's not a lot of personal cuts. There's not a lot of put-downs that one would expect to find. There's not, there's not screenfuls of, go to hell, which is surprising. So the kind of liberation.
Here's your dad's problematic fave, David Bowie, talking about how the internet will end corporate monoculture in 1999.
Felt that we were still living under the, in the guise of a single and absolute created society where there were known truths and known lies, and there was no kind of duplicity or pluralism about the things that we believed in. That started to break down rapidly in the 70s, and the idea of a duality in the way that we live. There are always 2, 3, 4, 5 sides to every question. That this singularity disappeared, and that, I believe, has produced such a medium as the internet, which absolutely establishes and shows us that we are living in total fragmentation. I don't think we've even seen the tip of the iceberg. I think the potential of what the internet is going to do to society, both good and bad, is unimaginable.
Here's a clip from the 1995 film Hackers.
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
Shut up and get in the car!
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
Dream of the internet, and this is the sort of 90s people are doing interviews about, well, the internet's going to like liberate people's minds. And it was because it was so decentralized, and that is constantly getting undermined. And it used to feel like the internet was like an escape hatch. Obviously, there were still adverts on it. Like there's that. Do you remember the guy who made a website in the early 90s that was just adverts?
No.
Yeah, there's some guy who's called like the $1 Million website or something. So he just made a website and just sold ad space on it. Mm-hmm. Just pure ad space. And that's it. He's the guy who went on to make the mindfulness app Calm because he made loads of money from doing it. Because it's from 16 years ago. Loads of the links are dead on it. So I'm not saying there was no adverts on the internet 20 years ago, but it felt like a much less corporate space. It feels like pop-ups or ads are worse now than they were 20 years ago.
The independence is terrible because they're I don't know what it is, whether their ads are more like animated or something, but they take a longer to load in. But also they're just like gobbledygook nonsense. It's the same. It's stuff you'd expect to see like on the bottom of a local newspaper bottom ad feed. It's like, this doctor didn't want you to know about consuming this medicine. Click here to find more. And it's like, the Independent is receiving minuscule amount of money to promote this.
Yeah.
That's ludicrous.
Well, there's that statistic, isn't there, which I don't know how accurate it is, but it's in my brain, which is that in the 70s, the average consumer saw 500 adverts per day, but now the average consumer sees 5,000 adverts per day.
Yeah, I imagine I can clock 500 an hour on a good day. One thing is that there are massive corporate spaces, and those corporate spaces dominate and have just managed to collate everyone into these spaces. So you feel like there's no point being on a little forum. Forums feel like parochial.
Yeah.
Anything that isn't legitimate, like being on Facebook or whatever, feels like you're in this weird little community. It feels not just parochial, but kind of frowned upon. Even something huge like Reddit, where you can talk about anything. You can just create a thing about pogs and just talk about pogs all day. I think you get assumed you are in the alt-right just if you have an account on it, because the other thing is we are a very unique generation. We are roughly the same age as the internet, where I'm not scared of it, the same way an older generation wouldn't quite know what's happening with this massively expansive technology. But I'm also not, it hasn't learned how to sell to me or use me. I was allowed to grow up in this weird space where the internet was just an unusual, interesting thing, beloved by some hobbyists and people who want to share ROMs.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a space where the internet didn't have a point yet, didn't have money yet. Every new thing has a golden age before it has stopped making enough money to be considered culturally significant. Because the moment you hit that point, that's it. Your thing, whatever it is wrecked now.
Is that I remember when I was at school, like an IT lesson, the teacher wouldn't know what the fuck was going on because, late 90s, early 2000s, every year 7 kid knew more about the computer they were on than the teacher, right?
And it didn't help at the time that the syllabus was geared towards stuff that actually was pointless. Like, it wasn't that we all knew we weren't losing important stuff, because everyone had this very narrow conception of what was important to learn, and it was
optical
Word
character
document
recognition.
based IT that you'd need to use at that time.
Yeah.
If you went into an office at that time and needed to do a certain kind of admin.
Yeah.
But by the time we grew up, none of those things, none
even
of that software was still relevant.
Yeah. It was a complete waste of time. But now the students I teach, they probably know more about like TikTok than me, but they type really slow. So this is one of the issues we've had with like remote teaching. It's loads and loads of students are having trouble typing quickly. They type really, really slowly.
Do they do boomer 2-finger typing?
They do boomer 2-finger typing because they don't use keyboards, right? So do you remember like when a text message used to cost 10 pence? This is going to, do you remember when? Right? But
we sound old.
We sound old, right? And this is the thing, I think, but we are old. We are old in terms of the tech, but it's interesting, I think. We know how to use keyboards because of things like, say, MSN Messenger, which enabled you to talk to your buddies free, but you did it on a keyboard. Smartphones didn't exist. Whereas now, the thing most, Zoomers use the internet for is talking to their mates, but they're doing it on a smartphone with their thumbs. They are bad on keyboards in a way that we're not. We're fast at keyboards because it's the thing we would use to communicate to our mates. So we're really quick on it, but they type real slow. It is a general trend across like every class I teach. We grew up with the internet. Alongside it, the oldest Zoomer doesn't remember a world without Facebook.
Yeah.
Right? And they don't remember a world without smartphones. A keyboard is like some like old caveman thing to them.
Yeah, or like a weird coder hacker thing, like a weird piece of contraband.
Yeah.
We picked up a lot of basic skills. Say it's reasonably fair to describe either of us as techie. We're not
we're not Fox Dog Studios.
Exactly. We've got friends who we'd go, that's like proper techie.
Yeah.
But the reason is that we never set out to learn any of these things. It's that the internet kind of sucked, computers kind of sucked, and they didn't work a lot, and you needed to know. It's like when your parents suddenly start like treating you like you know how to operate the TV because you know how to plug in the aerial for the Mega Drive, and they're like, oh, you know what happens back there, so can you like sort this out? It's like what you don't know how to tune in a. You just set a new channel and you tune it into an aerial. Yeah. And then suddenly you realize, oh, I know these things that my parents don't know. When the computer, that expand. I don't mean to anyone listening who's younger than us. What I've said about the Mega Drive and the aerial is going to sound like real gobbledygook.
We sound like fucking apes and we realise. But that's interesting. I think that's interesting. The apeification of millennials.
Well, we'd learnt loads of skills because the internet and computers had such an incredibly bad user experience.
Yes.
Because they hadn't really learnt what people want to use them for. Yeah. So you can't really make a good user interface if you don't know what people want this machine for.
Yeah.
And after a while, they did. I remember when loads of my friends started getting Apple stuff, and the thing that really put me off is that if it broke, you can't look under the hood, either like hardware or software-wise. You can't go in and fix it. And things really bother me now, where I can't go into a very complicated settings panel and make things be just right or fix things if they've gone a bit wrong.
Yeah.
One of the things that really bothers me about all social media is that there aren't any advanced search features. I can't put in a search range and I can't say, tell me if this person's ever used this word between 2015 to 2017. That search feature keeps me on Twitter, and the only reason that they haven't got rid of it is because not enough people use it. If that was used more widely, they'd get rid of that because it makes Twitter too navigable. And that brings us on to like the second half of it, which is first you make a user interface to make someone's life better, but then you keep the user interface to like funnel them into an area where they can see all the adverts, they have to follow the trends. They need to keep people in the now constantly. Because the now keeps people clicking, it keeps them looking at it keeps people putting the traffic where the people with the money want the traffic to go right now. It's the same way that a city is built. You build a row of very clean looking streets from your train station right to your main shopping street. Because you don't want people wandering out of there because there's none of like the centralized money has gone into making those look nice. And the money from that doesn't go into like the economy that you're trying to push. And we design our social medias in the exact same way.
You know, like there's all these initiatives that come from boomers about like fake news and whatever. And it's like, well, that's not a fucking problem for millennials and zoomers because we don't, it's the old media that whenever any fake news gets spread, it's because the Times or the Daily Mail or the Daily Mirror or Fox News or whatever pick up a thing that's clearly a joke.
Yeah.
And then believe it's real and then spread it. And then they're the people who are like, oh, we've got to stop this. And because they found it on the internet, they go, oh, the internet is where fake news is coming from.
Yeah, as opposed to their own illiteracy in the internet.
Yeah.
They've been duped, and then they've decided they've been lied to when they've read a joke.
Yeah.
These guys, if these guys were of a different age, they'd be litigating against the back of penguin bars.
Well, and also, you know, we want to talk about fake news. Go look at the fucking archives of British and American front pages at the start of the Iraq War about weapons of mass destruction. You know, that's not a fucking internet problem. But
they object to not having a monopoly on fake news.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the moral panics about the internet now are fake news, anonymity, and general culture war stuff. Whereas the old moral panics about the internet used to just be like, oh no, porn.
Yeah.
You wouldn't steal a banana. You know, like they were the two things of piracy and porn. And maybe I am nostalgic for that moral panic compared to like, you know, the modern one of, oh no, a Simpsons avatar has called Keir Starmer Keith again. They must be stopped. But, you know, while ignoring and not doing anything about like, you know, fucking Cambridge Analytica building an algorithm that makes 20 million uncles racist against a different group each week.
I think from what you've said, I think I can distill down the most important factor for why the internet sucks now, and we have very fond memories of it from like 15 years ago.
Well, apart from just youth nostalgia.
I think youth nostalgia's mixed in, but I think there is one key thing that is true. Not everyone was there.
Right.
Very few people used it, and the people who did sort of opted in. It wasn't like a public forum for all of society. It was just for us internet heads. I have lots of forum, virtual bulletin board nostalgia. And on that, you know, you would think that I would have far more diverse groups of friends on Twitter, which is like huge, than I would when I was just thrown into a little forum that just had people on a niche interest. But really, I met people from around the world, from every single continent on that forum. And they had very different, like I was on a little forum and we had a little chat room, and I'd spend time in the chat room in addition to the forum. I think I'm still a mod, but I've not been there in like 10 years. But like one of my friends was a Mexican communist. There was like a few like conservative American university students. There was a guy who was a jihadist. He fully believed in the jihad. And we were like, oh, this guy again. But he was still our friend.
Yeah.
He was still our friend, but he did believe on doing a jihad to the West. Yeah. And we had to put up with that. We didn't ban him. Do you know what I mean? It was just we all got on and talked about other things. Yeah.
Because you were on there for the niche thing. You didn't need to cover all the other bases.
We were a weird forum where the niche thing had gone because the admin decided that ROMs was too hot. It was too hot to be a ROM site. So we had no purpose, and our membership just dwindled away for a very, very long time. Then we became the official forum of some shitty clicker game. But the thing is, that was made by the admins. And none of us liked the clicker game or anyone coming in via the clicker game. And we treated them as like second class. And we made a partition in the forums for them to talk about their clicker game that we didn't care about. And then for us to talk about different things. And if anyone else came above that line, they got treated like shit. And I'm not defending that. We just didn't like them. But if they stuck around for long enough, you could kind of earn your way in.
Because I was like, we're going to do an old internet episode. I went to look for old message board type stuff. Some stuff's just gone. Some stuff just... I had a mixture of finding stuff that has just gone, and then me going like, oh, have I forgotten the name here, blah, blah, blah. And I could find references to things, but then the whole thing's just gone, which is quite grim. And then the other thing of like, you know, like finding yourself, you know, a decade and a half ago and going, fucking hell, this guy's annoying.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it. I have like old diaries I won't look at, and I don't think we've reckoned with, and this is a whole side issue to the internet, this is more about like people's behavior. I don't think we've reckoned with like the amount of people who grew up being photographed for like baby clicks and have been documented completely. Because I saw a TikToker who's talking about being the subject of a really early mommy blog, like before social media, and how that's given her like complexes throughout her life.
Oh, wow.
Except now I think her scenario is now the norm because everyone just documents all their baby's moves.
So I think there's a divide between the more sort of curated online presence of people who have grown up with, like I said, like people who've grown up with smartphones is just a normal thing. People who've grown up with Instagram. I think a lot of when they've chosen, so not their parent putting them as a picture of a baby, but when they have had control, there's a more curated self and curated experiences that are shared. Yeah. Versus millennials who just have like pictures of themselves on like some carnage bar crawl that they've forgotten are even on there. It was much less created and much more like just these giant fucking photo dumps in the sort of early 2000s when, early social media. I think the same habits have been cultivated and shared now in terms of that curated image and that, quote, personal brand, end quote. That's, when people talk about like mental health online, which I guess is the other, modern moral panic about the internet, is the effect of that self-curation and like how much that's fucked you up. But on the flip side, it's probably true that like doom scrolling Twitter to find out what the Tories are harvesting school children's blood to make themselves immortal, or the curated version of yourself for Instagram and the dissonance between that and your true self, like that's quite bleak. But at the same time, probably like watching salad fingers probably did some damage to your brain as well.
No, come on. No, I was with you the whole way. Everywhere I was nodding and saying, yeah. No, David Firth kept me. Kept me from the edge.
Yeah, David Firth is genius. That stuff still exists, but obviously it's like kind of deep YouTube now. I was going to make a compilation to show how corporate the internet is right now, but instead I just found this one clip that kind of gets the point across in and of itself. This is genuinely the first few seconds of a video from Simon Whistler's channel, Today I Found Out.
In our video today, a war crime so horrifying, so disgusting, so vile, that even the Nazis were like, whoa, this is some crazy shit. But first, this video is sponsored by HelloFresh.
This guy also hosts videos for Visual Politic, which is funded by a right-wing Chilean think tank that pines for a return to Pinochet's dictatorship. He has 2.6 million subscribers.
There's videos on Newgrounds that like cemented my sense of humor and interest in a lot of ways. People making weird stuff that I was dead into. This was like, I didn't watch TV at this point. I watched more Flash videos than I watched the TV.
Yeah.
And with Flash now disabled, there was a scramble for people of their own back just to archive whatever they could. And anything that's not archived, that's
it's just gone. Yeah.
And that's just talking about Flash animations. That's sad. It's still cultural. But the degree to which I look for old news stories using Google or Bing or whatever, so many things are gone. And the internet that was like uploaded about 10 years ago, maybe even less than that, it's unusable. You just cannot navigate those websites. And we're talking about like national press here. This is websites run by national press organizations. Those stories are just vanished, but Wikipedia links still go back to them. Like they are linked to elsewhere. This is the citation we've had to prove this bit of history happened. Gone, not maintained by the admin.
Like I said about looking for my participation in like old message boards or whatever, it's just gone. Like most of the internet isn't being archived. So you lose stuff because of tech, so like Flash, for example, but then you get just big errors, like MySpace deleted 12 years worth of, I think, music, because MySpace, like Arctic Monkeys got big on MySpace Music. So MySpace Music, as much as MySpace kind of tanked, MySpace Music was like pretty important for a while later. But they did a server migration. All music uploaded between 2003 and 2015, gone.
Wow.
Right? I mean,
what were those dates?
2003 to 2015.
Oh, well, that's the only recordings of the band I was in as a teenager must be gone then.
Yeah, honestly. Gone, right? But then, like, why would you hear it? Like,
Right.
They're not going to notify you, are they? You're not going to think about it, right? There's a thing called the Web Science Institute at the University of Southampton, which is trying to archive the internet. But obviously, they can't archive everything because of the amount of time it would take, and B, the amount of, like, just data that is. And it's a constantly evolving thing. But, like, it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, most of the internet is not archived. The local newspapers get fucking archived in libraries. They have to be. But most of the internet is gone. Like the early days of the internet, the majority of it is gone, never to be seen again. Nightmare for historians.
But also just a nightmare for like to live in. It's just a nightmare to live and exist in.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because we're constantly, I mean, we're talking about this as people who like observe our politics quite a lot through online, and also, you know, in the last year observed every aspect of reality that's not the park and the sanitizer through a screen. We're constantly like hearing things and we're going, hang on, that completely conflicts with something else I've been told. We're constantly getting these like conflicts, and we find out like, oh, the stuff from that has been gone away now. So that's not only like a memory hole isn't inside the mind, the memory hole is inside the server, which is our collective consciousness, because it's that which we can prove.
Wow.
Imagine like in 1984, if it's not just it's not people going out and burning books or like putting black marks through stuff. It's just collectively as a culture, we just put everything in the bin after 5 years.
Yeah.
Like it's no authoritarian regime to try and destroy the past. It's just like, we just generate too much data, just destroy it.
Wow.
Combine that with the other thread that I think there's still more to say on, is that previously not everyone was online, and that creates an environment where being online means that you are constantly in the public forum and you're getting every viewpoint often at once, because even if you're just following your friends are like quote tweeting things that they disagree with, so that you then need to reckon with a lot of different viewpoints at once constantly. And a lot of people, myself included, just live our lives in these little breakout rooms of like DMs and group messages, and we just talk to like a very little bunkers where we just talk to very small selections of friends. And so we've got like these complete extremes. I remember most of my life was lived with talking within a subculture of like a few hundred people. And now I only talk to either 5 people or 1 million people. I've only got those two choices of audience.
Wow.
And that feels fucked. I want small communities again. Because small communities can like get stuff done and actually ever come to consensus on anything. Imagine expecting Twitter to come to a consensus on a topic. What actually is the point of discussing it?
Maybe internet is bad. Maybe Twitter's bad.
I think that's roundly the consensus, yeah.
All right, we've reached a conclusion.
Logging on. Yeah, there we go.
Fucking
2 people, takes no time.
Log off.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. It's me, the sentient core of the internet. I observe your every waking moment. I watch the drama of human civilization unfurl before me like horny Sylvanian families. Today I will be interviewing Dr. Natalie Ashton, who will be talking to us about epistemic friction and social media. Good evening, Dr. Ashton. It is a pleasure to have you with us. Could you tell us what is epistemic friction?
Epistemic friction is that feeling that you get when you encounter somebody who has a very different understanding of the world than you do. So the epistemic part means that to do with knowledge and understanding, and the friction part is to do with how difficult that situation can be, but also how it can be productive. Think about when you learn about friction in school, they always tell you to rub your hands together. And when you do that, you can feel resistance. And if you keep doing it, you can feel heat. The idea is that something similar happens when you encounter different ideas and different values. When that first happens, it can be really jarring and difficult, but if you respond to it in the right way, it can be really productive, because you can learn something both about yourself and about the other person.
Thank you for your hand-rubbing analogy, which I, a computer, understand. Next question. What can epistemic friction teach us about how people communicate online?
I think epistemic friction is really useful for thinking about the ways that different social media platforms help us to interact with one another. Take Twitter and Facebook as an example and compare them. On Facebook, the platform is set up so that you mostly interact with people who you already know. So you're probably going to be friends with people who you know from school, perhaps like your family, people from work, that kind of thing, people that you already know in your real life who probably have relatively similar lives and experiences to you. But then when you think about Twitter, on Twitter, you're going to be exposed, most of the time you're exposed to a whole different range of people. It could be people from all over the world, people who have different political views, people who have had very different life experiences. Twitter exposes you to a lot more epistemic friction. You have a lot more chance to encounter different viewpoints and have that kind of jarring feeling than you do with Facebook.
So, do you think it's possible to analyze the epistemic friction potential of any given social media platform?
Yeah, potentially. I think that's kind of what I'm doing. I think that's interesting to do.
So, if I gave you an example, you'd be able to bash out a quick ranking?
Yeah, I'll just crunch the numbers and then I'll say good platform or bad platform.
TikTok,
Kind of too early to tell, but I think TikTok is very interesting, potentially good.
Roblox,
Is that like Minecraft but for younger kids? How much friction do you encounter on Roblox?
well, you could, meet an enemy.
Yeah, meeting enemies. Yeah, there's a chance for epistemic friction then. So maybe Roblox is epistemically good.
If that is the case, then Call of Duty is probably a decent.
Yeah, I imagine there's lots of conversations about politics on Call of Duty.
Well, I think you would be surprised. I heard quite a bit of discussion which could be described as political, but perhaps not the kind of politics that you would like.
You know how we're talking about corporations coming in and taking over all the space? Mm-hmm. There's a form of like primitive accumulation.
What's happened to the internet ultimately is a process of primitive accumulation and enclosure, but instead of happening to the common land, it's happened to the internet. And as I said earlier, the internet and the best aspects of the internet were these peer-to-peer, person-to-person community aspects, social, but wouldn't have been referred to as social media because the concept didn't exist yet. And sharing of, freely sharing things perhaps sharing episodes of Battlestar Galactica isn't mutual aid. However, it is a space outside of corporate control. That's what it felt like, and that felt good, and that has gone. We're not saying that niche internet subcultures have completely disappeared, but where they exist now is inside YouTube or inside Facebook. They've been enclosed.
If you want to hang out, you got to do it in someone's business. Mm-hmm. Okay, I like this form of analysis, and I want to just take it slow so we're not losing anyone. So the common land is what existed like before land was massively private.
Oh my God, are we going to re-explain the enclosure of the common land?
Have we already done this? So I thought, have we done this already?
If you want to know more about
primitive accumulation,
check out episode 46,
Moon Hermit,
for a super brief overview, the capitalism explainer in episode 1.
So we honkin'.
Thank you for listening to Mandatory Redistribution Party.
One thing that I think that we need to go into that differs on the internet is that no one enclosed us out of just building our own little websites. We can still do that. I could build a website today, but no one would go there. No one would ever know it exists. And it's become impossible to get anyone to care about it. The only place you can put things are on social media, or to get them like aggregated and someone picks up. Mm-hmm. Everyone who does anything is kind of scraping, looking for someone to go, wow, have you seen this thing? 5 BuzzFeed articles of things that they had to send as press releases for us to look at in the first place. We could just go all and leave Twitter and Facebook and just go back and make tiny communities. We won't, and I don't think it's fundamentally a helpful thing to say, because it's just like saying we could all just stop eating meat, or everyone could just stop going to McDonald's overnight. While it's sort of technically true, you
could just ignore capitalism. You could just say, don't want to do this anymore, and if you've got enough people to do it. But what you're describing is a revolution. It's very hard to make happen.
Logging off is a revolution.
If enough people did it.
Do you know Tim Berners-Lee's making internet too?
No.
Yeah, Tim Berners-Lee said he's making a sequel to the internet.
What?
He said this one sucks. The headline is the guy who made the internet says this sucks. And it doesn't need to be fixed. It just needs to be scrapped. It needs to be a new one.
So if it's important to be exposed to new ideas, does this mean we need to ensure exposure on online platforms to ideas like racism and fascism? Because I feel like I have been doing quite a good job on this already.
So when I talk about exposing people to epistemic friction, I'm not saying that epistemic friction is always good in and of itself. So one thing that's worth thinking about is who we prioritize when we want to increase epistemic friction. And we're going to get the most benefit if we hear from new people or new ideas that we haven't heard before. And so somebody like the BBC is going to put a fascist on Question Time and say that that's a new idea. But I think we all know that that's not really a new idea, right? Those are ideas that we've heard a lot from. At one point, they were dominant mainstream views. And we've all thought about them and we've decided that they are bad ideas and we have dismissed them. What I suggest is that we prioritise hearing from the people who, by definition, we don't hear from very much. So marginalised people, marginalised groups, those are people who, by definition, we are less likely to hear from. And so my suggestion is that we amplify those people's voices and we increase our epistemic friction in that way. And that is why I think that, for example, Twitter can be a really good platform for us epistemically, because you can hear from people who are marginalised in lots of different ways in lots of different places very easily, and we can learn a lot that way.
Last question. How would you use these ideas to propose a new way to make social media platforms better in the future?
So there are two things that I think are important for improving social media and making sure that it's epistemically beneficial for us. One thing is amplifying marginalised voices, because this helps increase our exposure to epistemic friction. But then the other thing that I think is really important is something that I call epistemic respite. I think we should, or social media platforms should, make space for people to step away from epistemic friction, to step away from those alternative voices in order to keep those platforms sustainable. So you see lots of people who decide to take digital detoxes and they'll just completely, they'll take all the apps off their phone, they'll give their friend their password or whatever, and they'll completely disengage from social media altogether. I think what is better is if users of social media platforms have control over how much friction they're exposed to. On Twitter, this could be things like you can mute certain words if there's like a particular news story or a particular topic or something that it's just doing your head in, you're hearing too much about it. Rather than like unfollow somebody or completely take the app off your phone, you can just mute certain words so that you can have a week off from thinking about that kind of thing. The really important thing about epistemic respite is that it's flexible and it's in your control, but also that it's temporary. So when I talk about epistemic respite, I mean that to be like a holiday. So what we don't want is to create echo chambers like on Facebook. We don't want people to be able to shut out sources of friction permanently, but temporary spaces where we can have control over how much friction we have, I think is really important to learning on social media.
Mandatory Redistribution Party was created and produced by Sean Morley and Jack Evans. Our title theme was created by Ella Jean. Additional music from Sean Morley and Jack Evans. Thank you for listening, and thanks to those of you who support us on Patreon or share episodes on social media. We really do appreciate it. I hope you're doing all right. Extra special thanks to our guest Natalie Ashton, who sat through an interview with the internet, which sounds quite difficult actually. Natalie can be found as Nataland on Twitter. Thanks also to the anonymous 4chan account who created that wonderful piece that we used for our introduction, whoever you are. I want it to be real, but even if it's not, it's high art.